Is your brand underperforming? Do you find yourself in endless meetings talking about ways to reinvigorate your brand? Or are you just unsure on the direction to take your brand in? Then a brand audit could be a great first step to getting your brand back on track. Hi, and welcome to Weekly Brand Tips, brought to you by Elements Brand Management. Weekly videos designed to help you to unlock your brand's potential so you can stand out from the competition and create impact. Please remember to subscribe using the button below. This means you'll never miss any of our content, and if you hit the bell notification, you'll be notified every time a new video drops. If you watch this video until the end, I'll give you some tips on how you can do a brand audit for yourself. Alternatively, there'll be a link in the description to schedule a call with Elements Brand Management, and we can help you do your audit. So what is a brand audit? Well, if you think of it like an MOT for your car, or when a player joins a new club and has to have a medical, a brand audit allows an agency like Elements Brand Management or a business and brand like yourself to run a full diagnostic on your brand. So if you remember in our previous video that you can see here, we discussed the 4 key layers of a brand. So that was your core, which is your heart of the brand, strategy or brain of the brand, identity or face of the brand, and voice or personality of the brand. An audit will look at these individual layers and see how they fit together, making sure that there is an aligned brand from the internal to the external brand. But it'll also dive into these layers and look at the individual elements within them. So brand messaging, logo, branded collateral, social media, your website, everything in these layers will be addressed within the audit. You'll also in the audit look at your direct and indirect competitors and your audience. And it gives a real 360 view on where your brand is currently. And it allows the agency or yourself to build out an action plan with some objectives to move the brand forward. The results of a brand audit will give you a list of objectives and advisories, sort of an action plan that will allow you to address the unseen issues that are currently costing your brand and give you some opportunities for business growth. So every brand audit is unique to the brand in question, but each should look at the 4 layers we talked about earlier on and the elements within them. Some brand audits will need to look at sub-brands or brand extensions and take those into account as a sort of a wider brand ecosystem. But each brand audit should look at those 4 layers and the elements within them, as well as a surface audit of your direct and indirect competitors. You want to look at their position in the market. You want to look at what they're doing well and what they're not doing well, and to give credit where credit is due. So be able to say, okay, they are doing this quite well and this is where they're not doing so well, and it will give you a really good idea of where you currently sit in that market and what your competitive advantage could be. So why is a brand audit important? Well, you find with a lot of companies, they've scaled quickly, they've added employees, extra level management, maybe they've changed tact recently with their message or how they're presenting themselves, and they've thrown themselves completely out of alignment. So we talked about it in a previous video, the idea of an identity crisis. Now, if you remember the 4 layers we discussed, well, an identity crisis is when one or more of these layers is out of alignment with the others. And what a brand audit does is it looks at those layers and it looks at the brand where it currently is, and it identifies the layers and the elements that are out of alignment, and then gives you some options and some advisories to put that back into alignment. Now, you sometimes find it when you've had upper level management come in and they've changed something and it's skewed the brand, it's moved it onto a tangent, and it's changed how the audience perceives that brand, how the audience interacts with it. It doesn't feel the same as it used to feel when they interacted with that brand. So the reason for the brand audit is to look at this and to make sure that the brand is aligned, and if it isn't, what isn't aligned about it, and how can we bring it back to that place of a unified brand. So the antidote to the identity crisis is the unified brand, and that's our methodology, the unified brand. And the first step to building a unified brand is having a brand audit, because what it does is it gives you a good indication of where the brand is currently and gives you some steps to take it to bring it back to being a unified brand. So how do you do a brand audit? Well, you can get an agency to do it, like Elements Brand Management, and I've put a link in the description if that's something you're interested in, or you can do it in-house. Now, if you do it in-house, you want to make sure whoever's doing the audit in-house has enough space and enough respect to be able to do that as impartially as they can. So they can't be worried about treading on anyone's toes. They've just got to be brutally honest and have the space to be able to audit the brand completely impartially. Also, another thing you can do if you are doing this in-house is take your newest 1 to 5 employees, sit them down and ask them the following questions. So, what does the brand stand for? What is the brand's mission and vision? What do they mean to the audience? So what does the brand mean to the audience? And where is the brand going? Do this with the longest serving 1 to 5 employees also, and hopefully there isn't too much of a difference between the two. But a lot of the time what you find is there's a big gulf between the newest employees and the longest serving employees, and this can cause a bit of a problem because you end up with two camps in the brand or in the culture. So one side thinking of the brand as it was and one side thinking of the brand as it will be, and this can cause a lot of issues. And if you think about it from your audience's point of view, so new audience members or new clients or customers are going to see it potentially similarly to your newest employees, whereas your longest serving customers will have similar emotions and feelings and connections to your brand as your longest serving employees. Not exactly the same, because obviously it'll be from a different perspective, but it's a good indication to understand how far your brand has changed over time. So the first thing you want to look at when doing a brand audit is to go back to the 4 layers we talked about earlier on. So looking at those 4 layers and auditing your brand through the lens of those 4 layers. So the core layer, which is your heart of the brand, which includes the mission, the vision, the values and the purpose. Your strategy layer, or the brain of the brand, which includes your brand strategy, positioning, content marketing strategy, marketing strategy, business development plans. The identity layer, or the face of your brand, which includes your logo, identity system, color palette, fonts, printed materials, signage, anything visual of your brand, photography as well. The voice layer, which is the personality of your brand, which includes podcasts, it includes your content marketing, it includes your video, and any time that your brand is sort of personified as like a character or the personality comes out. So you want to look at your brand through these 4 layers initially, just on a layer level, and see how the layers fit together. So do they make sense? And you want to do this from the core, which is the internal part of the brand, to the strategy, then identity, and then to the voice. Then you want to dive into the layers themselves and start looking at the individual elements within each layer and having a look at those and see if they fit in with the wider brand. So for instance, if you looked at the logo, does that make sense with the rest of the brand just in its layer? So the rest of the identity layer first of all, but then looking at the wider brand, and does it make sense with the wider brand? Or if you look at the brand messaging, does that make sense with the core brand or the strategy and where the brand's going? So you want to look at these layers first of all as a whole, then dive into them. And a lot of times where you'll start to see some inconsistencies, although the core and the strategy are probably the biggest movers in terms of if they get thrown out of alignment, then they are the biggest cause of an identity crisis, so they can skew you way off track. The most common thing that you see, and you'll probably at least see some of this when you do your audit, is the front end of the brand, the sort of presentation layers of the brand, the identity and the voice are the ones that most commonly have the inconsistencies in, and it's because they're not communicating that core brand effectively. So look at the audit, look at the layers, and you'll start to see where your main issues are, and you can start to build up that action plan that we talked about earlier. The next step is competitive analysis. So you want to look at your direct and indirect competitors. So what is a direct competitor? Well, a direct competitor is someone who provides the same solution to your target market. So for example, that might be Sky Sports and ESPN. They both provide a sports channel to the same target market, or McDonald's and Burger King. So they both sell burgers to the same target market. An indirect competitor is somebody that provides a different solution to your target market. So for example, in the previous example, McDonald's and Burger King, they're direct competitors. Domino's and McDonald's is an example of an indirect competitor. So Domino's serve pizzas, McDonald's serve burgers, but to the same target audience. So you want to look at your competitors, but also you want to think about who your indirect competitors are. Where could they come from? And sometimes it's worth thinking about threats. So emerging markets, technology and advances in technology can sometimes put your business under threat from a sort of indirect competition that maybe is only in its early stages. But as businesses and brands like Kodak will tell you, if you don't take those threats seriously, then you can have big consequences on your brand. So think about these threats, think about where they possibly could come from. And it might be the case that you start to think about either adopting some of these new emerging technologies, or you think of ways to counter them in your strategy and positioning. So when you've identified your direct and indirect competitors, what you want to do is look at them through the lens of those 4 layers. So do similar to what you did for yourself, but do it for your competitors. And what you want to look for is how aligned are they? How sort of structured is their brand? Does it make sense? And where are the weaknesses in their brand? And also where are the strengths? And then what you want to do is you want to look at their positioning and try and work out where they position themselves. So what are they staking claim to in the market? What are they bringing to the table? How do they differentiate? And this is a really great exercise, audit aside, to really identify some of the places that are free in the market, and also where your competitors are kind of pitched up and how you can differentiate. Next, we want to look at audience research. So if you've built out your defined target audience or audience segments and your brand personas, it's a really good point now to get those ready and to refer to them. If you haven't, I'll put some links sort of above this video, but also in the description, where you can see a video that we've done on defining your target audience and your brand personas. So if you get those ready, the next thing you want to do is you want to go to where you can get some data from. So Google Analytics, Facebook Analytics, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere you can find some data. You want to put it all together and you want to collate it, and you want to look at the audience demographics within that data. So who is finding you, who is reaching you, who is interacting with you. And what you want to do is look at that compared to your defined target audience and your brand personas. If these don't add up, if it's a completely different audience that is interacting with your brand as opposed to who you built your audience around, there's one or two things happening here. Either you have a product or service that is serving a completely different audience or segment than what you thought, or you are not reaching the right audience. Now, both of these are obviously a problem, especially if you've built your brand around the idea of trying to reach a specific target audience. So this can give you some sort of indication as to maybe what you need to do. So you might need to adjust your messaging or your strategy to reach the right people if that's what you want to do. Or alternatively, if you're actually reaching the people that the product's best suited for and you were wrong about your target audience and persona, then you can adjust your brand to suit that. Once you've done this, what you want to do next is go to anywhere and everywhere your audience hangs out online. That could be Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, general on social media, looking at different Instagram accounts. And what you want to do is you want to try and get an understanding beyond demographics on who your audience is. So who do they aspire to be? How do they talk? What are their goals? What are their ambitions? What are their problems around your product and service? And try to build out an idea, a character, And again, referring to that persona, is this right? Is your audience that you built up, with your personas and your audience, does it match who is actually out there and how they talk and how they think? This will give you a really good indication on your audience, and it's a really important step to try and work out how your brand is being perceived in this audit, so that you can adjust what you need to adjust in order to rectify the issues that have come up. So by now you should have a really good idea about how your brand shows up in the world, how it fares against competition, and how it's perceived by your audience. So now what you need to do is take all the points that you've found in the previous steps and create an action plan. So a list of objectives that you can do internally, or that you can use an agency like Elements Brand Management to help you with. What you want to do is work through these, and you want to do it through the layers, so from the core to the strategy, to the identity, to the voice. And make sure you do it from the internal brand to the external brand and not the other way around, because a shift in the core or the strategy layer of the brand will make massive changes to the front end of the brand. So make sure you do it from the internal brand to the external brand. So to sum up, a brand audit can be a really good way to evaluate where your brand currently is and to give you some pointers and advisories on how to take it forward. If you'd like any help with your brand audit, there is a link in the description below where you can schedule a call with Elements Brand Management, and we can go through a free consultation where we can decide whether or not you want to do an audit or anything else surrounding your brand. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, subscribe using the subscribe button below. Videos come out weekly, and they're designed to help you to unlock your brand's potential so you can stand out from the competition and create impact. Have a great week, catch up soon, and keep those brands unified.